okay. I'm all right.
Well, Tyler, what's up? I want to say thank you for being on Recovery Rockstars Top 3 for Recovery. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I've talked to you a couple times on the phone. You are such a pleasure. I just want to let you know that. Your heart is open and you're very grounded and you just have a calming and soothing tone to yourself. I enjoy talking to you. So I want to throw that out there before we even begin.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. I don't think it's always been that way.
Which we're going to talk about, aren't we?
Yeah.
So I want to get into it now. How long have you been sober?
Well, God willing, I'll celebrate 6 years next week.
That's huge. 23rd. Oh my gosh, that's huge. What's the exact date?
The 23rd.
The 23rd.
Yeah.
6 years. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And what were you struggling with?
Alcohol. Yeah.
Talk to me about that. When did it start?
Well, I look back now and I realize that I was not always a normal drinker, but I wasn't an alcoholic or heavy drinker. When I drank for effect. And I'd always drank a lot, but I never was, I didn't really realize that I had a problem with alcohol until very late in my life. I was probably 46, 47. So up until that point, I was always the real fun girl at the party, but then, that's what I did, right? I'd go and drink and get drunk and dance crazy. And and it really wasn't until after my son was diagnosed with cancer.
Oh my God.
And it was, well, I want to just say that was the tipping point, right? So up until that time, there were several things. And I think that's kind of how it works. It's kind of the perfect storm, right? I was born with a genetic disposition. And through life events, this perfect storm formed. And, by the time I was that age and these events happened, and that last one really being my son's illness, that I feel like it was just like this, the alcoholic was just building, kind of growing, and untreated mental and emotional issues, right?
Right.
To really look back at that and see that pattern and that happening. So yeah, it wasn't till, there's a page in the big book that talks about that a little bit, page 52, and that it's actually not uncommon for women to kind of late in life, just all of a sudden, and literally within 3 years, I was a full-blown alcoholic. I think it's what I did to live with the rest of my problems, which were numerous relationships and, the fear around my son. I mean, it was, like I said, a lot of unresolved issues, really from childhood. And, and eventually those all just, so I went to treatment in 2012, but I didn't go to quit drinking. I simply went to sort of start to deal with some of these other things that were happening and coming up for me. So I was diagnosed with PTSD, acute anxiety, chronic depression in 2012. So I thought, well, that's my problem, right? But they were telling me, and you're also an alcoholic. I'm like, no, really, I'm not. I don't drink before 5, and I drink on my back porch, and that's really not my problem. I'll deal with this other stuff and we'll kind of, that will resolve itself. Is what I thought.
Right. So, can I ask, how is your son?
Yes. It's so funny. I just had lunch with him today, and he's 21. He's about to be 22, and he is a senior in college. And he got out of the car today. I was sitting in the restaurant and I was waiting for him, and I looked out across and I saw this most gorgeous human being.
Oh. Love that.
And literally I thought, oh God, don't cry, because he just hates that. But I was overwhelmed at the miracle that he is. And he's a 2-time cancer survivor, and didn't have a very good chance of making it. So incredibly kind, incredibly funny, and very smart, just a wonderful human being. So.
Oh, I see. When you're talking about him, you're starting to tear up and your heart's swelling. I can see it. Oh, that's beautiful.
He's taught me more about life than any other human being. Truly.
Yeah.
With his own journey.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, you said that you were getting help for PTSD. You didn't really think you were an alcoholic. That was in 2012. And then after you tried to go to treatment, you started drinking again?
Yeah, I realized, you know, as I tried to start working on these problems that were also going on, the drinking wasn't getting better. So at
Mm,
this point, now looking back at hindsight, right, alcoholism is progressive. I'd
right.
already crossed that line. My amygdala was already, firing and going, you can, this is what you need to do to take care of this and that. Once you cross that line into alcoholism or addiction, there really is no turning back.
Right.
And I didn't realize that. So my drinking got worse, and therefore the problems really never got resolved.
Mm.
And in 2013, we actually celebrated my son's 5 year, and I sort of felt like that was going to be the end of all the problems.
Mm.
And of course, again, it wasn't. It's amazing to me how we can, we rationalize and we can justify, and it's like, okay, well, once I get to this point, once I get to this mile marker, once this happens, and it just, it's just not the way it is. And of course, I didn't know, right? We don't know, but I can look back and see it very clearly.
Mm.
So yeah, in 2013, we celebrated that, and I thought, things were going to get better. They didn't. 6 months after that, my mother passed away, which was
Oh,
very an aneurysm, and that was the final straw. I she probably was the reason up to that point that I had survived my life. She was extremely instrumental in helping with my younger son during my other son's illness, and she also knew about my drinking. So she is also, or was, an adult child of an alcoholic. She's also a heavy drinker. I mean, she was probably now, God rest her soul, my enabler. And I can say that because I think it's the truth. But yeah, so her passing was it. That was it for me. My wheels came off, and I think I really was either drunk, hungover, or somewhere, buzzed for about 9 months after
wow.
her death. And
Yeah.
finally went into treatment in 2014.
Where'd you go?
Well, I checked into Sante, Center for Healing in Argyle, and I went there for 50 days. It was sort of close to home. It was recommended by a friend, and it was a wonderful experience, wonderful facility. 10 days into my treatment, my husband filed for divorce.
Mm.
And, again, in hindsight, I look back and I realized that at that point, my recovery stopped, and the fear kicked in again. I didn't know what I was going to do.
Mm.
I thought I was going to lose my children. I thought, this, I mean, it was all of that. I still was not okay. And I didn't know what I was going to do as a divorced woman, and had been married for 23 years. And so I spent, 10 days like sort of detox, and then the next 40 days figuring out how I was going to, how I was going to get divorced and live my life, the rest of my life single. So I didn't get sober there.
Mm.
And that's just part of my story.
Yeah.
But what happened there is I learned more about alcoholism. I learned enough about alcoholism, the disease of alcoholism, to understand. And I was able to admit I was an alcoholic when I was
Mm.
there. So I
Good.
knew that.
Good.
And I
Yeah.
understood the science. Yeah.
Yeah. So then how did you finally get sober?
Well, a couple of days, a day or two before I was scheduled to leave treatment, my husband reconsidered and wanted to try again, and wanted me back. And at that point, I was already sort of gone in my head, and now I didn't really know how I was going to move back in. I was already divorced in my head and figured out that plan. So it was all very confusing. And, I drank the day I got out.
Mm.
I did. And I was out for just 7 days. And yeah, I was an absolute train wreck. And, they say even after, not drinking, I picked up right where I left off. And this is where relapse is so scary and so deadly, right? Because we start drinking or using or whatever right where we were, And yeah, so on my last night of drinking, I passed out at a meeting. I was
Mm.
at an AA meeting, and I passed out, and a girl there called my husband. He came to pick me up, realized that I'd been drinking, and all of that, and really just said, that's it. So that night, he said, that's it. getting divorced. I gave you a chance, da, da, da. And so at that point, drunk, hopeless, desperate, totally out of my mind, I grabbed a bottle of sleeping pills and got in my car and drove away with a fifth of vodka under my seat. And I drove to an abandoned lot that was actually one we owned, a property we owned. And I sat there and I took an entire bottle of sleeping pills and I drank a fifth of vodka.
Oh my gosh. What happened?
Well, I died. I mean, that's basically what happened. I obviously don't recall a lot. There was some spiritual moments going on. I certainly can remember bright lights. I can remember loud noises. I can remember lots of bits and pieces of things. Some of it isn't super clear, but somehow that next morning early, my car made it from abandoned lot back to my house. And we had that on actually video surveillance, the car, but there was really you couldn't see the driver at all. And I made it back to the house into a guest bedroom. My husband came later that day, found me, tried to shake me, wake me up, thinking I was just, drunk or whatever, and sort of left me there. I don't barely remember that at all. And then that night he had gotten into my car and found the bottles and came back up to the room, shook me again and asked if I'd taken the sleeping pills and the vodka. And I had said yes. And he said, "You're crazy. You're out of here in the morning." So the next morning, I remember waking up and then saying goodbye to my kids, and took a suitcase and a Bible and a big book. And I Googled state hospitals and ended up in another treatment facility that afternoon. Wow. And so there was a doctor on call, and I, had explained to him what had happened. And he did a physical examination, and there's certain things that happen to a body when it ceases to be alive. And certainly, there is no explanation. All I know is that I shouldn't be here.
That is absolutely insane. That's crazy.
Wow. I know.
Well, yeah. On that note, let's get into your top 3 for recovery. Oh, wow. Gosh. So you've experienced a lot, and this is where your experience and your insight and your wisdom on your top 3 is really going to help a lot of people out, because to go from essentially dead to thriving in life, which seems like you're doing now based on having, a couple conversations with you, I think you have a newfound appreciation for life and for breath and for getting up every single day. So I would love to hear your top 3 for recovery. Number 1.
Number 1 is meditation. And it was a toss-up for me, prayer and meditation. And I know in a lot of the rooms, people describe prayer as talking to God, meditation is listening to God. But for me, it's what I knew about myself is that I was one of those that the Big Book describes as having grave emotional and mental disorders. That's what a person is that commits suicide, right? And I learned about meditation through yoga and through some other practices. And what I learned was is that I could change the way my brain was wired, called neuroplasticity. And through several different practices, I settled on a practice called centering prayer. It's one of the many that I do, but it's my go-to. And this practice is 20 minutes a day. And it is about having a sacred word, consenting to the action and presence of God, and sitting with that sacred word and your breath for 20 minutes. Wow. And I've done that every day, sometimes twice a day, for about the last little over 5 years. And it's changed my brain and it's changed my heart. It has changed everything, the way I am, the person that I thought I was. Yeah. This coming to this place of true essence, right? This place of love, this place of peace, this place of serenity, this place that we all are, there is. in all of us. And it's this light, right? We have to nurture it. And that practice of meditation, I don't have to do anything except show up and do what I'm supposed to do for 20 minutes. And for me, it was the hardest thing. It's like, well, I'm not really getting results. I mean, it was very slow and it was subtle. And it wasn't until one big thing happened that I didn't recognize the person that reacted. I had changed.
Yeah.
I had changed.
Wow.
And that continues to be amazing. So I practice all kinds of meditation. I teach meditation now, mindfulness for relapse prevention. I am a huge advocate. I don't think our literature, especially, I can speak just for AA, but goes into really enough depth. You know, our 11th step mentions it, but it's really not, a little bit in the 12 and 12. But if I could do one thing for the rest of my life, is to be an advocate for meditation and recovery.
Love it.
Yeah.
Number 2.
It's going to be prayer. You know, that is something, having a relationship. So my last words that I spoke before I took my own life was, God, take me home. So for me, it wasn't about not having a belief in God. I was active in my church. I was active in my community. I was a study leader. It wasn't that. I remember coming to, and the first thing I thought was, oh, God doesn't want me either, which is so pitiful, I know. But when I had my spiritual awakening, I recognized the God that I met was not the God that I believed in. It was different. And what the truth that came to me was, the God of my understanding, which literature talks about, is that I was believing in someone else's God. And I got to meet this God, and I got to have the experience of this encounter. And then for me, the last 6 years has been about building that relationship. And I build my relationship with the God of my understanding through prayer. And that is simply through sharing my day, sharing my thoughts, sharing every moment of my life with this power that only wants the best for me. And it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming to live that way. So for me, prayer is a way of being. It truly is. It is a way of having a relationship with this power that, and it's better than a best friend. It's closer than a spouse, or it's really bigger than my mind can wrap itself around, but I feel it and I know it. It's an experience. And I think that relationship, when our literature says the God of our understanding, I think that it's true that God will show up to each of us as we are, because that's how we'll recognize God. And so opening ourselves up to that idea, and then building on that. And the relationship is trust, right? You met your wife, I don't know, some time ago or at some point, and you guys dated, and then you maybe broke up, and then you tried something else and maybe moved in. And so this has been the thing, and it's still, right? It's work every day. You got to show up.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yep.
There's no difference.
There's no difference.
There's no difference.
We got meditation, prayer, and number 3.
Number 3, I would have to say, get in touch with your body. Listen to the body. This isn't, when we talk about thoughts, we have thoughts. We all have thoughts. Every thought has an emotion connected to it. You cannot have a thought without an emotion. And every thought and every emotion has a bodily sensation connected to it. They all three go together all the time. And what I have noticed and found out about myself, especially people now I work with in recovery, they all come in with all sorts of chronic body issues, right? Hips, knees are big, shoulders, all low back. I mean, they, multiple surgeries, this, that, and the other, whatever, this, that. And the science has shown, and it is proven, when we hold back tears, when we're sad and we feel that urge to cry, where does that show up? We get a lump in our throat. Where does anxiety show up? In the stomach. So every single thought, every emotion is connected to the body. And when we do the work mentally and emotionally, which I think the literature and recovery and doctors and psychologists, however you want to do that, I think they do a fabulous job. But if we're not dealing with what's stored, and I started with this work deeply in Y12SR, Yoga for 12-Step Recovery. My mentor, the founder, Nikki Myers, is amazing. And I started looking at where all of this stuff had been stored over the years. And I've had tremendous breakthroughs through the work. And so now, for me, a big part of my practice in meditation and in prayer is what's happening. Because here's the truth, Kevin. We can lie to ourselves all day long, and addicts and alcoholics are professionals. We are, and I'm gonna just say that because it's the truth. We can justify anything. We can rationalize anything. Our bodies can't lie. And we can tell ourselves whatever we want to tell ourselves, but our bodies know. There's a beautiful book called Mending the Mind, Minding the Body. And it's fabulous. There's so much good literature out there now. And I think as addicts and alcoholics, we have to treat the whole problem. It's a mental illness, right? It's a disease of the mind. But if we have a thinking problem, we also have a feeling problem. It says in our literature, we're sensitive people. Well, yeah, we are. But there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I embrace that. But then we've got to have a physical problem because they all three go together. And so that's something I'm also very passionate about. You know, getting the message, whether it's yoga or Tai Chi or some sort of it's some sort of movement. I don't care what it is. Get in touch with what's happening here. Listen, you know, befriend your body. At the end of the day, you know, this is the only place we have to live. This is it. This is home.
It's fascinating. Tyler,
yes.
Full of wisdom. You're full of wisdom, and I want to say thank you for sharing that with myself and with the Recovery Rockstars audience. Really appreciate you being on our top 3 for recovery.
Thank you, Kevin. God bless you and all your work. I really, really honor that. And yeah, keep carrying the message, my friend.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful
Thank you, Ted. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Okay.